Hey guys, SimizDim here, back with another Airsoft review. This time it's the Delta Armory PAR MK3. It's a culmination of Delta Armory and a real steel manufacturer called Pro Arms. The format of the review is as follows. Normally I go over a brief history about the real steel version, however there isn't too much. I will go over it, but it won't be as long as usual. Then we'll go over my first impressions, a chrono test, a practical accuracy section. Basically, instead of shooting a target, it's going to be raw gameplay like we have in the background. Then my final impressions and rating out of 10. But let's get into the actual review. Let's quickly go over the brief history of the Mark III. It's a real steel rifle made in the Czech Republic. They offer them in a variety of barrel lengths. The one I have is the 12.5. The real steel rifle is chambered in 5.56 or 2.23. It's boasted to be highly reliable and robust due to the parts being made out of high quality materials. For example, the entire exterior is all CNC'd. That is no exception with the Airsoft version. In my 20 plus years of playing Airsoft, I can tell you that the Mark III is probably one of the, if not the most robust Airsoft gun I've used. I have no problems playing rough with it. Very brief history there, as there is not much that I could find out about it, as it's not really fielded by any militaries or police establishments. Now let's move on to my first impressions. Upon opening the box, I noticed that it looked very remarkably pieced together. That goes back to it being made out of CNC materials. It's just super sturdy. Like I said, I wouldn't worry if I dropped it. I'm not going to drop it, as I always have a sling on all of my rifles, and I recommend you do too, but you get the point I'm trying to make. What was nice as well, I know I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to front ends on ARs, as my friends tell me all the time. It has a nice sturdy quad rail, and when I say sturdy, there is no wobble. It is actually bolted to the upper receiver, which is really nice. It's almost monolithic, but it isn't. It is two pieces, but it is very sturdy, and the rails are actually to spec as well, which is nice, as a lot of Airsoft replicas, some of the Picatinny rails can be off-sized. Not in this case. Internally, it comes with a decent, plastic but decent rotary style hop unit. You get a 6.03mm type bore barrel in there as well. I don't know what the hop rubber is, it might just be one of Delta Armory's house owned ones, but again, I've had no issues hopping BBs. I normally run 0.28 gram BBs in all of my riffs, so nothing too heavy, hasn't had an issue. It slings them out there quite nicely. The Mark III does boast a MOSFET, however it's quite simplistic. It's basically just a trigger MOSFET to make your trigger pulls lighter and more responsive. That's about it. For the price, I was kind of hoping we would get a more advanced ETU, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. The gun does perform pretty well. The gameplay in the background is actually my first outing with the Mark III. I went and played my first battle sim up at Anzio Camp in Leek, Staffordshire. As you can see, even inside, the whole area was just totally wet, and it was tremendous downpour of rain for 90% of the day. The gun worked great for about 70% of the milsim, but rain did get into it, unfortunately, and it shorted the MOSFET. So basically what that meant was I had safe, semi, full auto. However, semi was also full auto. It lost the function to have semi auto. Not that big of a deal, as to be honest, it was probably some of the worst conditions I've ever played Airsoft in. So it's an electric gun, so what do you expect? That was probably my fault more than the riff itself, so I can't actually hold it accountable for that. One thing that is nice as well is, like most riffs now, especially AR pattern ones, they do boast quick change spring systems, and the Mark III is no exception. You can change the spring on the Mark III in under 5 minutes. It's really easy to do, so that is also a good one. because if it's a little bit underpowered when you get yours, you can make it legal. In our case, it would be 350 feet per second, but if you lived in somewhere like America or Canada, you can put a bigger and more powerful spring in there very easily. Or if you're taking this abroad, you can do the same thing. Overall, I had pretty decent first impressions of the Mark III. Like I said before, I did take it out for its maiden voyage in some pretty bad conditions, so can't hold it against it. That was more my choice. But now let's move on to the Chrono Test. 2 5-gram BBs in the Mark III. Just an FYI, I don't count these next couple of shots, as I don't think the chrono was reading them. And there we have it. Unfortunately, my chrono decided to misread, but here are 8 of the ones that it did read correctly. As you can see, the highest was 287.1 FPS and the lowest was 277.5. That means there is a grand variance of 9.6 FPS. Pretty consistent if you ask me. Now let's move on to the accuracy. Basically, I'll show clips of myself using it in practical application, basically going out and taking it and recording gameplay with it. So let's jump into that.
Yellow! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Go for rewind.
Heck!
South or west side?
Got him.
As you can see in practical application, it's pretty accurate and pretty consistent. I've got no complaints there. But now let's jump on to my final impressions and my rating out of 10. Overall, the Mark III is impressively built. It's very sturdy, there's no wobble at all in the upper or lower receiver. The stock, which is a CTR clone stock, is a little bit wobbly, so I'm not sure if that's out of spec or the buffer tube is. I haven't actually tried any other stocks on it. Internally, it boasts some higher quality parts. The entire gear set isn't your standard run-of-the-mill gear set. It's built a lot sturdier, so I don't have any issues with that. The motor's pretty decent as well. The hop chamber is a nice rotary style one, and it comes with a type bore barrel, which is a 6.03mm barrel. No complaints there. That just lends to the accuracy you saw earlier. A lot of my issues were just little fiddly bits, so the trigger guard was very wobbly and out of spec. I've actually replaced that now with the BCM Gunfighter trigger guard, which fits perfectly. Then there's just a few other things. The MOSFET shorted itself out. Again, that's mainly my fault as I took it on a really wet and windy game day, and that's how it shorted. But Airsoft Direct sorted it out for me, so now it is shooting perfectly. There are a few nitpicky things that I don't like. For the price of this riff, you don't get things like when you pull the charging handle back, it doesn't actually lock back, so you have to hold it back to adjust your hop. But that's like nitty gritty bits, which I guess I'm a little bit spoiled now, as a lot of riffs do that straight out of the box. It's not a deal breaker, but it would have been nice. Overall, I've had a really positive experience with the Delta Armory PAR MK3. It's just ran really well, apart from the MOSFET shorting, like I said, but that was more my fault. Itself, if I hadn't taken it into that environment, it would probably still be running flawlessly without having to get the MOSFET changed. I would recommend it if you want a riff with a solid build. It's probably, as I've mentioned before, the most solidly built airsoft gun I've ever used, and I can't fault it for that. It would also, because it's all in spec, it would make a good host for HPA. Unlike my 416, which the base was a Spectre Arms SAH20, it's slightly off spec, so it doesn't feed some mags, whereas this feeds everything I've tried to put into it with no issues. That being said, let's move on to the rating out of 10. I will give the Delta Armory PAR MK3 a solid 8 out of 10 pews. The reason for only 8 out of 10 is because, like I said, it's just lacking some features that you would expect on a riff of this price. That's it for the review, guys. I hope you enjoyed the review and the review format. I'm going to leave a link to it from Airsoft Direct and from Delta Armory as well in the description below. Let me know what you think, and if you have one of these or if you're thinking about buying one. This is Sim is Dim, and I'll see you in the next review or gameplay.